I want to just mention a little bit about cycle time. So when I talk to engineers or groups of engineers, sometimes if we discuss the concept of cycle time, it's kind of regarded as the bottom level, the bottom of the rung of metrics to track, and questioning how much value there is. There can be dependencies that are outside your control, which can affect cycle time if you're dependent on another team to get some work finished. And maybe it's not a measure of a high performing team. I do agree with that concept and that sentiment. But there is some important things that can come about from measuring cycle time and having targets to reduce cycle time. In this particular team that I was working with, they had a cycle time of around 4 days. Actually, when I first started the conversation with them, they weren't even measuring cycle time at all. But I encouraged them to start to measure it. So they came up with the number of 4 days. Okay, that was their average. I gave them a challenge to say, what would it mean if you brought cycle time down to 1 day? Okay, which is quite an aggressive target. For me personally, as if I'm an engineer in a team, I would love to have 1 day as a target cycle time. I think if you're an engineer in a team and you're able to ship code at the end of the day straight to production, you feel good about the work you're doing. You feel good about the achievements you've made. So it ends your day with actual software in production, which is a great outcome. So I landed the challenge to them. What would it look like if you went to 1 day? Now, 1 day was a little bit aggressive for them, so we negotiated to 2 days. What would it look like for 2 days? Now, this particular team had some challenges because the work that they were doing required them to work mainly within a legacy code base, which is in a monolith, which was shared by a number of different teams. Now that meant that your releases, because of the age of the code and the kind of practices that were done around the code in the early stages or during the life of the monolith, there wasn't a great setup or culture of automation, of testing, so a lot of it was manual. The team had this challenge. They were working mostly in this space. Now, one element of working in these kind of areas is that you need to kind of schedule releases and coordinate with a whole bunch of other teams because multiple teams are making changes to this at once. But you generally only want to have your changes be released at one time because you want to reduce risk and not have other things actually being released at the same time. Otherwise, you have things that are unknown, and if things go wrong, it can be very difficult to fix. But in the challenge to get to 2 days of cycle time, the team had some very important discussions within the team around what would that look like. How would they actually structure their work? How would they break down their work even more? It kind of introduced a new level of discipline in the team. What they ended up doing was they were able to shift and their release timeframes and have them more often. So a lot of teams were kind of booking around a 4-week time frame between releases, and that means that what you're deploying can be substantial. You've got a whole team's of work over 4 weeks being deployed at once. So they booked releases that were, say, 3, 4 days, 5 days apart, around a working week. And that meant that their changes were a lot smaller. It meant their risk went down. They spent less time actually testing, which is great. And they were able to get faster feedback. They were able to get changes into production faster. And generally speaking, for the team, culturally, it increased the feeling of flow within the team, which helped them kind of view themselves as a higher performing team, making improvements, be able to make changes, and kind of feel that happening in the day-to-day work that they were doing, which is a great outcome.